Farmers still watched the river with a practiced caution, measuring its height against familiar stones, reading its mood, and the way its surface caught the wind. The desert had a way of reminding them, sometimes through a hot wind that smelled of faraway dust, sometimes through a horizon that shimmered just a little more sharply than usual, that nothing here was promised forever. When evening came, the river was a mirror again. Boats glided homeward, their oars dipping in slow arcs, each stroke pulling a long silver line across the surface. Fires were lit in courtyards, casting small golden windows of light onto the streets. The smell of roasting grains drifted in the air, mingling with the cool scent rising off the water. People gathered along the bank, not only for necessity but for company, their voices carrying in low, easy conversation. There were those who believed that the river, like a person, could remember kindness. They said that when it had been treated with respect in times of scarcity, water lifted without greed, shared without grudging, it returned with a more generous heart. Others said that it was simply the way of the world here. The river would come and go, the people would bend and straighten in response, and in that cycle was all the wisdom one needed. Whichever was true, there was no denying the quiet satisfaction that came from seeing the Nile full again, from hearing it move in the dark hours, from waking to its cool breath in the dawn. When water was scarce, people had drawn inward. Now they opened again. Festivals were planned for the cooler evenings, marked not by great displays but by shared meals in open courtyards. Oil lamps were set out in careful lines, their flames swaying gently in the night breeze. Musicians played slower songs, letting each note rest in the air before releasing the next. Dancers moved with wide, flowing gestures, their linen garments catching the lamplight like soft sails. In the temples, water once again played its role in ritual. Priests carried it in tall, narrow jars, pouring it in arcs before statues of the gods, letting it pool briefly on the stone before it was caught and carried away. The scent of frankincense and myrrh drifted through the high halls, mingling with the faint mineral smell of water itself. Those who came to pray washed their hands at the entrance, the drops cooling the skin, as if marking the shift from the dust of the street to the calm of the sacred. Even the smallest of gatherings took on new warmth. Neighbors met in shaded lanes, leaning against walls, while exchanging news and fruits. Children carried waters to the elders, not because they were asked, but because the act itself had become a form of greeting. Travelers passing through were offered a drink before they were offered anything else. The cup pressed into their hands before even a name was spoken. With the river full again, the markets began to hum in a way they had not for many months. Not loudly, never loudly here, but with a steadiness that felt like breathing at last made easy. The stalls filled with color, deep green herbs laid in thick bundles, pale yellow gourds with skin so thin it dented under a finger, baskets of figs splitting gently at their seams to show the pink sweetness within. There were piles of river fish, their scales glinting as if each one held a secret sunrise. Water jugs sat in shade behind every merchant's feet, and even in the busiest moments, there was always time to pour a little into a visitor's cup. Children darted between the stalls, carrying small errands, a bundle of meat into an aunt's stall, a loaf of bread to a neighbor, a string of onions for the evening meal. Their voices had changed since the dry months. The restraint was gone, replaced by the rising and falling music of their games. When they grew thirsty, they no longer paused to calculate whether the sip was worth the loss. They simply drank, wiping their mouths with the back of their hands before running off again. In the workshops, the rhythm of work returned to its long, steady beat. Potters once more kept clay dams for days rather than hours, shaping vessels meant to hold the generosity of the river. Weavers soaked flax more often, letting it soften and yield into the spindle with a silkier thread. Bakers, freed from the need to ration fuel as strictly, kept ovens hot through the day, sending out smell of bread that carried over rooftops and coaxed passerby to linger. By the river's edge, laundry days become communal again. Women knelt side by side at the shallows, their arms moving in slow, strong rhythm of scrubbing and rinsing, cloths snapping softly in the air before being laid across warm stones. Conversations moved from the troubles of scarcity to the plans of abundance. Who would plant what? Which festivals might be held? What gifts could be prepared for the next marriage or birth? As the weeks passed, the seasons began their slow turn towards the cooler months. Evenings lengthened, and the heat of the day softened sooner. The river surface shifted from the hard shine of high summer to the softened sheen of the autumn light, mirroring skies streaked with pale gold and violet. Boats lingered longer before mooring, their sails catching the last breeze of daylight, as if reluctant to give it up. With the cooler air came a different kind of gathering. Families carried their mats to the rooftop earlier, spreading them out under skies that deepened towards indigo. Here, the stories grew longer, told in the slow cadence of people who knew they had hours before sleep would claim them. Some stories were of the dry months, softened now in their retelling. Others were older still, passed down from ancestors who had known floods so great the river seemed intent on reclaiming the land entirely. Festivals followed the returning water like shadows following light. Some were tied to gods of the river, marked with the small offerings placed at the bank, a handful of grain, a carved wooden figurine, a garland of fresh-cut reeds. Others were more earthly, music and dance in the square, torches lit along the streets, clay cups of sweet wine passed from hand to hand. In these moments, the memory of thirst was not erased but gently set aside, folded like a cloth, and placed in a safe corner of the mind. The animals too seemed to remember. During the dry season, goats had picked at sparse leaves in the shade. Now they grazed along the river bank, their coats slick with the shine of helmets. Birds nested lower in the reeds, secure in the knowledge that the water would remain to protect their young from prowling paws. Cats, ever practical, stretched themselves along warm stones near the shallows, one eye half open, tails flicking lazily and passing flies. And beneath all of this, markets, festivals, work, rest, the river kept its steady voice. It spoke not in words but in sound. The soft lap of current against boat hulls, the creak of wet rope on wooden posts, the hushed applause of reeds bowing in the wind. To live here was to know that voice by heart, to sense its changes the way one senses the mood of a close friend. Even in the fullness of water's return, the people did not abandon the small arts of conservation. At night, wide bowls were still left out to gather dew, a habit so ingrained it felt more like a prayer than a precaution. Doors were still open and closed with the sun's path in mind, keeping cool air in and hot air out. Shaded courtyards still served as the center of the home's life, the place where work and rest could be done in the same quiet air. In this way, life became a weaving, threads of abundance and threads of restraint, crossing and binding until they formed a cloth strong enough to hold through any season. The cloth was invisible, but its presence could be felt in the ease of a morning greeting, in the steady hands that poured a cup, in the unspoken understanding that everything was shared. And so the years turned. The river rose and fell, sometimes generous, sometimes shy, but always returning in some form. The people bent with it, their lives tracing arcs that mirrored the water's curve. When they walked to the bank each morning, they did not see only the surface, they saw the depth of their own endurance, the memory of scarcity, and the gratitude of plenty, all reflected back to them. The desert never ceased to remind them of its power, through its endless horizon, its heat that could press like a hand, its wind that could lift whole sheets of sand into the air. But the river's presence softened those edges, turning challenge into rhythm, and rhythm into a kind of peace. And as night came once more, rooftops filled with quiet figures lying beneath the stars, the moon spilled its pale light over the water, and the wind moved through the reeds in slow conversations with the river's current. No one hurried to sleep. There was no urgency now, only the slow settling of a world at ease. The jars were full, the walls were cool, the air was kind, and in the dark, the people of the Nile dreamed not only of the days to come, but of the river's endless patient song.